Actually push its way northwards during the day on Sunday. Still some heavy pulses for Aberdeenshire, the Highlands to begin with, and then eventually into the Northern Isles later on. The cloud in the east will be a bit stubborn to clear throughout the morning, but into the afternoon some brighter spells should develop, but it will be Wales, southwest England that sees the best of the sunshine. On Sunday, temperatures though again climbing towards 25 degrees Celsius in parts of London. Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello and welcome to Saturday Morning Live with Esther and Phil. Now, you will have heard the news, the very sudden news that Hamas has attacked Israel, and we'll be discussing the implications with that with our panel, Simon Danchuk and Kevin Woodford.
And the Labour Party are starting their conference today with a spring in their step after a resounding victory in the Rutherglen and Hamilton West by-election. We'll be speaking to the Guardian's political correspondent Aubrey Allegretti about how Labour are going to be approaching their conference this week.
And we've got friend of the show, Harry Redknapp, coming on to talk about that VAR decision in that Liverpool football game last week. He'll also be talking about Kevin Keegan. Do men want to hear men talking about the football match? We'll find out what Harry has to say.
And speaking of the battle of the sexes, how big a role should political spouses have
Huge.
in their other half's political life? This comes obviously after Akshata Murthy made a speech at the Conservative Party conference introducing her husband Rishi Sunak. We'll be speaking to the political spouse of all time, Christine Hamilton, about whether that was a good idea or not. And of course, we want to hear what your views are on all of these issues. Let us know, join in the conversation, tell us what you think, and we'll read out as many as we can throughout the show. But before we get stuck into all of that, here's the latest headlines with the marvellous Tamsin.
Phil, thanks very much, and good morning from the GB newsroom. It's 1 minute past 10. Thousands of rockets have been fired into Israel from the Gaza Strip in a surprise attack by the Hamas militant group on Saturday morning. Large plumes of black smoke could be seen rising from a number of Israeli towns. Israeli Defence Minister said Hamas has launched a war and its troops were fighting against the enemy at every location. One person has been killed and there have been reports of explosions near Tel Aviv and areas surrounding Gaza. Israel's military says it's striking targets in the Gaza Strip amid a situational assessment. Well, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu issued a defiant message saying, "We are at war and we will win." Well, the Foreign Secretary has condemned the attacks. James Cleverly wrote on social media, "The UK unequivocally condemns the horrific attacks by Hamas on Israeli civilians." He goes on to say the UK will always support Israel's right to defend itself. And Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has said there is no justification for this act of terror, which is being perpetrated by those who seek to undermine any chance for future peace in the region. And he went on to say that Israel has a right to defend herself. This is a developing story, and we will, of course, bring you more on this as we get it throughout the morning. To other news now, and SNP leader Humza Yousaf is being urged to rethink plans for independence after Labour's victory in the Rutherglen by-election. Labour's Michael Shanks defeated the Scottish National Party by winning 58% of the vote. It's prompted calls for Yousaf to rethink his proposal that winning the majority of seats at the next general election would be a mandate for negotiations on Scottish independence. Meanwhile, Labour has vowed to work constructively with the Scottish Government if it gets into office. Train services have been suspended in parts of Scotland after an amber weather alert for rain and floods. The Met Office has issued warnings for large parts of Scotland and northern England until Sunday morning. In contrast, fine and dry weather for southern and central England. Temperatures could rise to as high as 25 degrees by tomorrow afternoon. One of Pablo Picasso's masterpieces is going on sale next month and is expected to fetch almost £100 million. The Spanish artist's 1932 work, Femme à la montre, depicts his golden muse, Marie-Thérèse Walter. She had an affair with a painter and was the subject of many Picasso portraits. Well, let's just take you straight to Liverpool and the Labour Party conference where Angela Rayner is speaking. Let's have a listen to what she has to say.
Sometimes it's tiring being a woman in this world, especially under a Tory government. But that is why it falls upon us to continue the work of the last Labour government, standing side by side so that all of us succeed in battling inequality together. I want to start today with a story. Picture the scene. A baby boy is born, destined for Eton or Harrow or Winchester. Then PPE at Oxford. When he walks into the Houses of Parliament, he feels no imposter syndrome, only the feeling that he's home. He's exactly where he should be. He doesn't struggle to make his voice heard, no hesitation to steal a well-made point and call it his own. On the other side of the country, A girl is growing up on a council estate in poverty, taught that women do certain things and men do others, to put everyone else first, overlooked, undervalued, underestimated. She'll never walk in the corridors of Westminster. It's not the place for her. Only that's not what happens. She joins a union. She learns the power of workers coming together to fight for more. A Labour government introduces a minimum wage. She can afford more than one meal a day. A Labour government builds council houses. She gets the keys to her first home to stability. A Labour government introduces the Equal Pay Act. She gets a pay rise, enough so that she can save. And Conference, a Labour government, builds a Sure Start centre at the end of her road, where she learns to be a good mum. She meets other young mums and finds the power in each other. And in the end, that girl goes from her council estate to the parliamentary estate. Conference, like so many of us in this room today, I wouldn't be standing here today without a Labour government. Labour is the party of equality, of the Equality Act, of equal pay and of Sure Start. I'm proud to say that in the Labour Party today we have more women MPs than men. And with Rachel's eyes fixed on being the first woman Chancellor, we're turning the tide of history. But Conference, the battle isn't won. There still aren't enough women around the table. It's not enough for us to cling onto our seats and celebrate the fight it took us to get there. You only need to look at the horrific acts of powerful men abusing young women and hiding in plain sight. This is why the next Labour government will fight for every girl in this country to have a bright future, to stand up for every woman and to break the class ceiling and the glass ceiling. Conference, our New Deal for Working People will make work more family-friendly, crack down on unfair pay and improve access to justice for those discriminated against at work. And as I was pleased to announce today, Labour will properly tackle sexual harassment at work. A shocking 2/3 of young women have been sexually harassed at work. This must change. That's why the next Labour government will amend the Equalities Act to introduce a legal duty for employers to take all reasonable steps to stop sexual harassment before it starts. But that's not all. We will make misogyny a hate crime. Will toughen sentences for perpetrators of rape and stalking and halve the level of violence against women and girls. Women suffering the awful symptoms of menopause at work will get the support that they deserve. We will empower women entrepreneurs and will tackle the crisis in women's health by training 7,500 more doctors and 10,000 more nurses and midwives each year.
Angela Rayner speaking there, Deputy Prime Minister of the Labour Party and Shadow Levelling Up Secretary. She's kicking off proceedings with the Labour Party's Women Conference there before the full summit that starts tomorrow. Equality, a big message here from Angela Rayner. She is saying today they're going to make misogyny a hate crime, tougher sentences for perpetrators of rape and more support for women suffering menopause. So a big drive here for equality for women. And her pointing out that there are more women MPs than men in the Labour Party. So Angela Rayner speaking there. I think Keir Starmer to appear later on. We will, of course, bring that to you as well. His keynote speech, of course, on Tuesday, the Labour Party conference starting tomorrow in full for 5 days. We'll, of course, be bringing you that to you here at GB News. Just a quick reminder of our top story, though, here this morning. Thousands of rockets have been fired into Israel from the Gaza Strip in a surprise attack by the Hamas militant group this morning. Large plumes of black smoke could be seen rising from a number of Israeli towns. Israeli Defence Minister saying Hamas has launched a war and its troops were fighting against the enemy at every location. We know so far that one person has been killed and there have been reports of explosions near Tel Aviv and areas surrounding Gaza. So this, a developing story. We will, of course, bring you more on this story as well throughout the morning here at GB News. Now, though, that's it from me. Back to Esther and Phil.
Thanks there, Tamsin. Now to look through the top stories of the day, to talk about that Israel story and the implications of it, we're joined by former Labour MP Simon Danczuk and celebrity chef and award-winning presenter Kevin Woodford. So shall we begin with you on that news there, Simon?
Yeah, this is really significant, isn't it, the attacks in Israel. I put my cards on the table. I'm a founding member of Labour Friends for Palestine, and I've been out to the region on a couple of occasions, and there is an argument for Palestine. But this attack from Hamas into Israel, I mean, it isn't an act of terrorism. It looks quite clearly like an act of war. I mean, that's the reality of it. It's very significant.
I know Hamas media has displayed videos of the bodies of Israeli soldiers. We've got Palestine media has already reported that they've taken soldiers captive. Where do you think this will go? What do you think about the implications and the people living there, the families?
It's always the same, isn't it? In a situation of terrorism or war, it's the innocent individuals that are really going to suffer. I mean, already you can see there's this sort of scramble to get supplies and to lock themselves away and keep themselves safe. It's a horrendous situation. And we're going back, I mean, this is a day after the 1973 anniversary, right, of the war that brought the defeat that this is all about. This has gone on for so long. It's horrific. My heart goes out to the people that are really struggling out there, and the fear that they must be going through at the moment. You know, this is the minute anybody mentions war, it must bring terror and horror through people's hearts. Honestly, it really must do.
I mean, Simon, like you, I've been out to Israel and Palestine and spoken to both sides of the conflict. Really, I mean, is there ever going to be an end? I mean, is there a path to ending this particular conflict, do you think? Are we destined just to have this repeated time and time again?
It's the extremist element on the Palestinian side, Hamas, that don't seem to enable any solution to this. These attacks that we see today unfolding before our eyes clearly heighten, escalate the troubles there. And Israel will quite rightly respond. I mean, this isn't a random act of terrorism. This is almost war. And we won't have a solution if Hamas act in the way that they are doing today.
And GB News will be keeping everybody up to date with that story. But looking at your story of the day, what was in the papers that caught your eye, Kevin?
I fear for this country because I used to smoke years ago, and I stopped many years ago, right? And now we've got a situation where...
What age did you start?
I started when I was 15, you know, and it was the right thing at that time to do because it was cool and everybody was doing it. And I stopped when I was 22, thankfully. So I'm not a fan of smoking at all, but I'm also not a fan of things being imposed upon us, banning us from doing things. And Boris sums it up nicely, I think, in both the Mail and the Times, where he talks about this is a monstrous waste, potentially, of police time. He talks about a new era of prohibition. Where do we go next? Do we start banning red meat? Do we ban sex? Do we ban No, do we? Is it bad
how are you
for us?
going to check whether anybody is doing that? We've got cameras in the house.
Where do you go with
the
this?
thing is here, I mean, I saw Boris's article today saying that this ban on smoking is ludicrous that Rishi announced in his conference speech. And as it happens, I tend to agree with Boris. But of course, Boris is the guy who introduced all the restrictions during COVID and banned everybody from doing anything at all. He's the one who was wanting to ban buy one, get one free offers in the supermarket.
Phil, all you can say is he must have learned from that particular period in his professional life.
But I want...
But the scary thing for me is that this could lead to, if it does develop as they're suggesting, I mean, if you've got a situation where you've got a 41-year-old standing outside, you know, a shop, and a 40-year-old who's you know...
Can you go and buy me some cigarettes?
And then where do we get the underworld then? That they could make a fortune out of this because we've got prohibition and we've got sort of little sleazy little smoking bars tucked away in little alleyways, dark and seedy.
What do you make of it, Simon?
All of this change, though, after lockdown, this now statist interfering with your lives from 6 people round a table that you could have, getting home for 10 o'clock, is this all part of this? Is this where it's flown from?
I think it has, and I think I'm amazed that it's coming from a Conservative government.
Presumably Labour will support this when they...
Well, they probably will. I can imagine Starmer and others enjoying this and completely supporting it. I'm with Kevin. You're going to have people claiming that they are older than what they actually are, so they can carry on smoking. We usually try
Simon, no lady would ever do that. Trust me, we won't be doing that unless you're under 18. But the other thing is we've got ludicrous position now, haven't we? You've got these rooms in Glasgow where you can take heroin and you can do that lawfully, but we're going to ban smoking. You're going to have it where you can have cannabis, but you can't have smoking. So you can have the cannabis, but it's going to be illegal to get the baccy to go with it.
So we know that people will carry on smoking, whether they do it illegally or legally. They will carry on smoking.
They will. And I think, isn't it the case that Jacinda in New Zealand, she introduced a complete ban as well,
yes,
on smoking?
That's right.
And it's a nightmare.
Queen of the woke.
Queen of the woke, yeah, absolutely.
But it does seem very popular in the opinion polls.
Does it? But the other question you've got to ask yourself then, if you look at the figures, right, we've gone from 43% smoking in 2000 and whatever it was, 2002, we're down to 15% of the adult population smoking now. Right. So it's come down anyway. So why are we doing this? It's ridiculous.
Simon, let's move on to your story.
The big story for me, well, the one that I particularly find interesting, and I think it's a great piece of journalism, is in the Mail, pages 42, 43, Daily Mail, Starmer's A for Hypocrisy. And it's an investigation by a journalist, Guy Adams, who does a thoroughly interesting job on Starmer's education and the fact that he benefited from going to a private school. He had a scholarship, so his parents weren't paying for it, but he's subsequently been fundraising for kids to go to private schools, which seems quite ironic, and that's why it's hypocrisy, because he wants to take VAT off private schools. So thoroughly interesting investigation.
He's getting away with all of this oscillation and changing his mind, whether it's supporting Corbyn or not, whether it's renationalisation or not. Is this a way to victory, or will he get found out as a hypocrite?
Well, I think we're seeing more of this investigation into Labour's policies, and quite rightly so. I think they've got off quite lightly in terms of being scrutinised in terms of their policies. But this is a good example of where they are being scrutinised. And what the article makes clear is that Starmer's really doing this, throwing some red meat to the far left within his party to try and keep them happy.
You say the far left, though, but I mean, you were the MP for Rochdale, working class community. Will the policy on private schools making them pay VAT, won't that be popular with lots of working class communities like people in Rochdale?
I suspect it will resonate quite well with Labour, traditional Labour voters. But why is he doing it? It's a bit like the ban on fox hunting that we had under Tony Blair, where it wasn't so much about animal rights, really. It was more about Blair being seen to clobber the well-off, the rich, and get advantage from that. And I think this is a similar sort of policy.
What do you make of it, Kevin?
Well, I'm a fan of private education as well. I think it's a choice that we should have. And I think one of the things that we've got to bear in mind is that the number of people that go into a private education system reduces the number of people that are going into the state system, and therefore that can keep the class sizes down. So I'm totally against the idea that VAT should be scrapped on this. Completely object to it, completely. And I do think that this is just a little vote catcher for him, that's all. And it goes back to Simon's point. I mean, I read the same article, Simon, and what a hypocrite the man is, to be quite frank.
Kevin, Simon, stay with us. You'll be back looking at the papers later on. But it's certainly been a week to celebrate for Keir Starmer after his party swept to a huge victory in the Scottish by-election of Rutherglen and Hamilton West.
Polling expert John Curtis says if Labour can repeat that performance across the country, Starmer will be a shoo-in for number 10.
So there must be a buoyant mood up there in my hometown of Liverpool, where the party conference will kick off tomorrow.
Let's speak to Guardian political correspondent Aubrey Allegretti to get his take. Aubrey, thanks for joining us. I presume everybody will be cock-a-hoop in Liverpool this week, won't they?
Good morning. Yes, I think that's right, if they manage to make it up there, because unfortunately some of the trains have been disrupted going up to the Labour conference, and the Conservatives were very unhappy about that as well. But yes, a lot of politics is about momentum and narrative. And so coming off the back of the by-election win in Scotland, it's almost a perfect sort of jumping board for Labour to claim that they are with power, that sort of next 12, 13 months ahead to the next general election is theirs to lose, really. And all of that provides really good sort of atmosphere and backdrop to kind of buoy Labour activists up, try and get them feeling like the wind is in their sails and that they can do this.
Aubrey, you said the word momentum there. Are you still allowed to use that word, or is that a bygone word? Now, we saw Angela there starting off the conference talking about things like laws on misogyny, talking more about the menopause, more about women's rights. How will that go down in the Red Wall seat? How will that go down in Liverpool? Focus purely on women.
So, yeah, it's interesting. The sort of structure of Labour's conference is that they always have the National Women's Conference on the Saturday before the sort of full national conference opens on the Sunday. So we're hearing a lot today about announcements that are specifically designed to tackle violence against women and girls. I mean, there is a broader sort of political imperative here for Labour, which is that they're trying to paint the Conservatives as no longer the party of law and order. And so this is really a sort of a strong thing they feel they can use to show people that Labour is an alternative party, a government in waiting, if you like. There are sort of three prongs to Keir Starmer's strategy. If you look back from when he was first elected in 2020, which was basically change the party, expel the sort of Corbynites. The second phase was attack the government, criticise the government, point out all of its flaws. And the third phase was present Labour as an alternative government. So we're likely to hear more in the means of kind of policy and announcements this weekend and then in the run-up to the next general election than we have in the first sort of two phases of that approach.
Aubrey, thank you very much indeed for bringing us the latest on the Labour Party conference. We appreciate your time. Now, coming up with a bedbug infestation said to be on its way, we'll be asking head of the Bedbug Foundation, Dr. Richard Naylor, everything you need to know to keep them away.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Saturday Morning Live with Esther and Phil. It is 10:27.
Now, a plague of bedbugs, yes, you heard me right, bedbugs has hit Paris and other French cities, provoking a wave of insectophobia.
France is blaming the rise of international travel due to the Rugby World Cup and the Paris Fashion Week.
Now, we're being told the bugs could be en route to London if they're not already here.
Well, join us now to discuss this is the head of the Bedbug Foundation, Dr. Richard Naylor. Richard, thank you so much for joining us. I didn't know there was a Bedbug Foundation, so that's been good for me to know.
Is that
today.
to protect the bedbugs or to protect us, this foundation?
But why is there such a problem all of a sudden in France? Is it because of the travel, because of the Rugby World Cup, or is there something else at play here?
I would say it's not a sudden problem. It's been growing fairly consistently since about 2005 in every major city all over the world. So this is a global problem. In Paris, it's recently become a political issue, and therefore there's been a lot of media around that. It gives the false impression that Paris has a bigger problem than everywhere else. But in my experience, I would say that every major city is having this problem at the moment.
Now, can I ask you, because obviously growing up, I would have thought it was associated with dirt, lack of cleanliness, I don't know, bringing dirt in out the street, whatever it is. Why are they on the rise, these bedbugs? What is happening in our cities?
Yeah, so bedbugs thrive anywhere where there's high human population density because it makes it easy for them to spread. They can just walk out of one apartment and into another if people are living close together. So it certainly benefits from better central heating. There are problems with insecticide resistance. There are multiple factors that have resulted in bedbugs increasing globally at the moment.
So if you find bedbugs in your home, what do you need to do, Richard? What should our viewers do if they come across one of these?
If it's come over from Paris.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, they could already be here. They could be more likely coming from your neighbours if you live in a city. But what should you do? If it's well established, if they're in multiple rooms in your house, then really it's a professional issue to deal with. It takes a professional to figure out where they're hiding and to treat them. And then they might be treated with heat or with steam or with insecticides. But insecticides are becoming the growing resistance to insecticides is making them less effective than they were. So there's a lot of investment in finding alternative ways to control them.
Richard Naylor, thank you very much indeed. So keep your eyes out there for bed bugs. Well, I thought it makes my skin quite literally crawl at the thought of that.
Well, there you go.
Well, as that conference gets underway, the Labour conference in Liverpool, Keir Starmer repeated that his government would introduce a Race Equality Act to tackle structural racial inequalities.
Given that the Race Relations Act of 1965 outlawed discrimination on the grounds of colour, race or ethnic or national origins, and the Equality Act of 2010 specified race as a protected characteristic, it's got people asking, do we need another law?
Well, we're joined now by Femi Nylander and Eric Hines, and I'm going to start with Femi. Do we need this new law, and what will it actually provide?
I believe that it's clear that we do need a new law because structural racial inequalities still exist in the country. So the existing legislation obviously isn't doing anything. Yes, previous legislation has looked, for example, at the idea of the direct discrimination in the housing market, saying you can't say, I am not going to rent to you because you are Black or you are of Pakistani origin, but that legislation doesn't necessarily deal with, as we've mentioned, structural issues, which mean that people of Afro-Caribbean backgrounds, for example, are much more largely likely to be in poor housing, in unsatisfactory housing, in council estates, etc., etc. But again,
so Femi, just on that. Just on that point, because that's a fair point, but how do you pass a law to change that? What does the law say to change that? If there's a disproportionate amount of black people and ethnic minority people in poor housing, how do you pass a law to change that? What does the law say?
I mean, this is the thing. So this is the interesting question between just passing laws and not enforcing those laws, or actually kind of drilling down and saying, cool, we're gonna really attack this structurally. And this is where it gets to the core of some of the things that British people hold valuable, and we're going to have to ask ourselves some very deep questions about things like inheritance tax, about
let's ask
like
Eric then.
housing,
how do we get, if we just ask Eric there, who's a professor at law at Queen Mary University, how are you going to get a law that makes those changes that Femi is talking about? How would you structure that?
Yeah, well, for example, you can have a law which fosters programs simply to promote investment in certain neighborhoods, in certain areas, to promote businesses, right? A law doesn't necessarily mean that somebody goes to prison to enforcement. There are many things that laws can do simply to facilitate, to promote, to reaffirm equality as a civic value.
But Eric, if there's a Labour government and they want to do this, why do they need a law to do it? Why can't they just do it without passing it? Why do they have to pass a law to do it?
Well, what do you mean by do it without law?
Well, if they want to invest, you said about encouraging investment in certain neighbourhoods and things like that. That's what you gave as an example. What I'm saying is, why can't you do that anyway? Yeah. Why do you need a law? Why do you need to pass a law to encourage you to do it? Why don't you just do it?
Well, I mean, a law can actually provide a framework, a system, something that people can immediately look up and refer to and use, and then there's some kind of understanding about what's going on. So it doesn't necessarily have to be informal and predictable. So, I mean, I don't see... I mean, you're right, maybe a law is not absolutely essential, but nor is it destructive, and it can be quite helpful.
Femi, can I just ask you, would you like to see a race equality law allow positive discrimination in a way that positive discrimination at the moment is illegal? Would you like to see that in a race equality law?
Well, I'll get to that question just in 1 second. I just wanted to just quickly add something onto your previous question. It's not as though Keir Starmer, and not that I'm the biggest fan of Keir Starmer, it's not as though Keir Starmer is going to get involved in every single housing dispute in every place across the country. You can't say that the central government is going to do everything themselves. The whole point of legislation is to is to basically allow people at lower levels to implement things. If you look at the current Conservative government, one of the reasons the current Conservative government is putting in a lot of very restrictive legislation around things like protesting and around things like human rights is because in the future they want subsequent governments, when they themselves get voted out, to have to follow the same rules that they've set. So part of the reason the government is going to install a law is because that government doesn't know if it's going to be there in 5 years. So if it wants to make long-term change, it has to set a framework down. It's not just that the government itself can do it.
We're
But
running
moving
out
on
of time
from
here,
that,
Femi.
to your point, positive discrimination. I think in some cases we can see that positive discrimination can be a good thing because it's a chicken egg problem. If you have something like an educational inequality, what that means is that a lot of people who go to top universities and become politicians and set the next generation of laws, etc., are going to come from particular backgrounds. And the question is, do you attack that at the chicken or the egg? Do you say, cool, well, we're going to
Femi, we're going to have to go to the news next, but thank you both for joining us. Femi Nylander and Eric Hines, thank you very much indeed. But now let's go over to Tamsin for another news update.
Esther, thank you. Well, let's just bring you up to date with the breaking news story this morning. Thousands of rockets have been fired into Israel from the Gaza Strip in a surprise attack by the Hamas militant group this morning. Large plumes of black smoke could be seen rising from a number of Israeli towns. Israel's defence minister said Hamas had launched a war and its troops were fighting against the enemy at every location. At least 22 Israelis have been killed in the attack so far. That's according to Israel's N12 News. And there have been reports of explosions near Tel Aviv and areas surrounding Gaza. Israel's military says it's striking targets in the Gaza Strip amid a situational assessment. Well, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has issued a defiant message saying we are at war and we will win. Rishi Sunak has also said this morning that he's shocked by the attacks, but that Israel has an absolute right to defend itself. Foreign Secretary James Cleverly also saying this morning the UK unequivocally condemns the horrific attacks by Hamas on Israeli civilians. And also Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer, who said there's no justification for this act of terror, adding that Israel has a right to defend herself. This, of course, a developing story. We will, of course, bring you any updates as we get them this morning. Now, though, let's just get back to Esther and Phil.
Thank you there, Tamsin. Now, we did actually do a Twitter poll coming up today, and that was Labour are promising a new Race Equality Act to tackle structural racism in society. We're asking, do we need this new Race Equality Act? 12% only said yes and 88% said no. But by the interview we've just had, they didn't actually know how they were framing that law and how it was going to work and actually if you needed it all, did they?
Anyway, let us know what you think. gbviews@gbnews.com.
Now, rent for homes outside of London has reached a record high, according to Rightmove. The property website says the average advertised price of rent is almost £1,300 per month.
It's because of a lack of enough rental properties to meet the huge demand. On average, each property is getting 25 inquiries.
And a separate report says a quarter of UK private renters are spending over 40% of their income on housing.
We're going to get both perspectives on this now because joining us down the line, we've got the director of Priced Out UK, Freddie Poser, and chief executive of the British Landlord Association, Sajjad Ahmad. Freddie, thank you. We'll start with you. Thank you for joining us. Who do you think's to blame for this particular problem of high rents? Is it immigration into the country being too high? Is it land profiteering landlords? Is it not building enough houses? Where do you pin the blame for this?
The blame's entirely on not building enough homes. The fact is there's too much demand for the amount we've built. We could have built more homes, but over the last 50 years, we've actively decided not to build the homes we need, and we're suffering the consequences now. We're seeing high rents and high house prices.
But you say there's too much demand and not enough supply, and therefore saying that what we need is we need more supply. Why do you not look at the demand side of it? Why do you not say, well, we need fewer? We had 600,000 net immigration into the UK last year. Do you not say, well, we need fewer people coming into the country? If it's supply and demand, why do you just look at supply? Why not look at demand as well?
Well, there are a couple of answers there. I mean, priced out, we focus on the supply because I think that's more important. Even if you got rid of all immigration, which I don't think would be a good idea, you'd still need significantly more supply. But also, by building supply, we grow our economy. I mean, it's a positive step to build more supply. I mean, we can be a much richer, more prosperous country by increasing the supply of homes, by making it would not just make rents cheaper, hopefully, but it's an actively good step. It would grow our economy and be really good for the country. And I think that immigration, I think, is a separate debate. It's not the main reason house prices are too high. The reason house prices are too high is because we haven't built enough homes.
Let's bring Sajid into this. Sajid, thank you for joining us too. I mean, where do landlords have a role to play in this? I mean, some people might say, that they're profiteering at the advantage because of the so much demand. They're putting rents up to unaffordable prices. Do you accept any of that criticism?
No, we don't. We have said for the last 2 years the housing policy that has been coming in, legislation after legislation, is driving landlords out of the sector. But there's a lot of landlords leaving. It's no longer profitable for them to rent property. There is obviously the tax changes. But in addition to that, you've got legislation which makes it very difficult for landlords to deal with defaulters. And so therefore that can be very expensive. It's just come to a point where landlords have said enough is enough and they are leaving the sector. I mean, I am a landlord myself. I've been a landlord since the age of 18. My portfolio was something that I anticipated that I would be able to use, in my retirement. But even I am selling my portfolio because it's no longer viable.
So I'm guessing then, people are coming out of the private rented sector because the laws are too tight, too draconian, maybe interest rates gone up, mortgage prices are, various other things in the tax system. What laws would you want to see introduced to maybe keep rent prices down? Some people are talking about rent control. Would you be of that mindset, Freddie?
Absolutely not. I think rent control is a really terrible idea. Everywhere it's tried, it's currently trying it in Scotland, Berlin, places like that. And we're seeing the real negative effect. It drives landlords out of the sector, but also the effect on properties that stay in the sector is also very negative. We see, low standards of maintenance, and it's very bad for tenants.
So, Freddie, is your solution? Freddie, is your solution really just build many, many more houses? And what are you looking at then? We need to build every year. What are you looking at?
So, yeah, the answer is we need more homes, and we need more homes where people want to live. So a national target, a national number would definitely be well in excess of 300,000. But the key is that they need to be especially where the prices are high, where people want to live, where there's a huge gap between supply and demand.
And Sajid, if we can just finally come back to you, what is it you would like to see the government do to make sure that there were more rental properties? I know you talked about sort of some of the draconian measures that you described as for landlords. Is there anything else that the government can do in order to get the private rented sector up and running better?
Yes, I think it's a matter of confidence, giving landlords confidence. Even with the tax changes, set those aside, landlords still would be interested in investing further, adding to their portfolio. One of the changes which the government made is decoupling the right to, arguments they got a counterclaim when a landlord applies for possession when it comes to rent arrears. At the moment, you've got very protracted procedures for taking your property back. You can end up spending £70,000 trying to get your property back. That's a far cry from when the Housing Act came in, when Margaret Thatcher introduced the 88 Act, which basically was a promise to investors. You can let your property out without fear of getting your property back.
Sajid,
now,
thank you.
Sajid,
Thank you very much. And Freddie, thank you very much indeed for joining us. You can see the dilemma there between the landlord, who's got all those difficulties, and the tenants there, but building 600,000 homes a year or whatever, 300,000 plus, but not concerned about immigration. Freddie's you've got to work everything out.
Anyway, coming up, Premier League legend Harry Redknapp is back with us to analyse last week's VAR howler between Liverpool and Tottenham.
Plus, how prominent should the husbands and wives of politicians be?
That depends who the husband and wife is, I guess. Anyway, as ever, keep your views coming in, gbviews@gbnews.com, and we'll be back with you in a moment. First, here's the weather.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
On GB News.
Welcome back to Saturday Morning Live with Esther and Phil. The time now is 10:48. Now, this week, we saw Rishi Sunak's wife, Akshata Murthy, take to the stage at the Conservative Party conference. She was met with mixed reviews, with some calling the tradition outdated and others hailing her as the Conservative secret weapon.
So how prominent should the husbands and wives of politicians be? Unless, of course, your significant other is a fellow politician. Well, join us now is Christine Hamilton, wife of Neil, Christine, you never shied away from defending your husband in public, and you were a sort of a high-profile spouse of a politician, if you don't mind me saying so. What did you make of Akshata introducing Rishi at the conference? Was that a good thing for her to do or a bad thing for her to do?
Several points. I don't think it was either good or bad, to be honest. It seems to me a rather American thing to do. It's what we expect of American first ladies. It's not what we expect of British political prime ministerial spouses. The last one who did it, of course, was Sarah Brown, and that ended in disaster. Gordon went on to lose. So I suppose her job was to... She didn't tell us anything we didn't know. We know he's kind, we know he's a family man, we know all that. But we didn't come away having learnt anything at all. He suffers from a charisma bypass, so maybe she was supposed to put a bit more interest into him, but I left me just cold. I wasn't against it and I wasn't for it. But you know, what I find disturbing is that we never expect, you two are obviously a complete exception to the rule, we never expect the husbands to come out. We never expected to see Mr. Truss or Mr. Braverman or Mr. Patel or Mr. Badenoch. And obviously Dennis Thatcher would have run a mile before doing it. So, and I don't expect we'll be seeing Lady Starmer either. The other thing, which I think one has to bear in mind, is that probably the majority of people in that hall rejected her husband. She may have said yes to him, but they didn't. They wanted Liz Truss, and they never had a chance to vote for him directly. So I don't. It's fine. That's what they wanted to do. I would never have done that for Neil. I would never have introduced him. I mean, hell no. I used to go out and do my own speeches. I would go and speak to, whether it was the ladies' lunch or the businessmen or whatever, in my own right.
But I think it's interesting what you say there about the different dynamics, that, you know, a wife is there to be supportive. And by the way, she was very eloquent and very accomplished. She did it actually very well indeed. But I think you're right. The women's role is maybe more supportive. You wouldn't have had a bloke do that. Let's ask Philip. Philip, if I'd have been there marching on, would you have introduced me?
I would have done if you'd wanted me to, but I suspect you wouldn't have wanted me to. That's probably the issue.
But I think the other thing you noted, is we never learnt anything more about him. I think that's maybe what people were going to do. We don't really know that much about Rishi. We know how diligent and conscientious and clever he is. But did we want to know, did he iron his own trousers? Did we want to know, does he polish his own shoes, or does he make the dinner? I don't know. What did we want to know about him, Christine?
Well, I don't care whether he irons his own trousers. I mean, I might care if I was married to him whether he helped around the house, although they've probably got plenty of staff. I don't care about that. What I care about is whether he can iron the economy out. But one big thing which I think they must have talked about long and hard is that it is now open season on her. She has come to the fore, pushed or pulled, whatever. She's out there. So no longer can he say, you mustn't talk about my family, because she has put herself out there. Kids, obviously, off limits. You know, each to their own, but it's very unusual. I think it's very
It's an interesting point you bring up there, though. It does open her up in a way to greater scrutiny. It does open her up to greater attacks. I'm quite sure she's a strong cookie, but unnecessarily so, perhaps, Christine.
I'm sure she's a very strong cookie. You have to be a strong cookie if you're a political wife. Otherwise, very often you'll find that the marriage disintegrates if the wife can't cope with it. I'm sure she's a tough cookie. She comes from her mother was a major businesswoman in her own right. It hasn't all come from the father. So what I wonder is a single person, when they're in that ballot booth, are they going to hover on and think, oh, I like Mrs. Murty, Mrs. Sunak, whatever. Are they actually going to vote for Rishi? Otherwise, no. I don't think it's made any difference. It was perfectly sweet and she looked lovely. And as you say, Esther, not an auto cue, not a single note. She spoke from the heart. No bad thing, not an easy job.
Christine, I mean, I wouldn't ask Esther to introduce me because I don't think she'd find anything positive to say about me. So it'd probably backfire badly for me. But do you not think that people do like to find out a bit more about their politicians now and a bit more about their what they do at home? And do you not think people like a bit more of that now, even if you don't necessarily?
Oh, no, I quite agree. I think people do. Possibly what I'm saying is I'm not quite sure that a big set-piece conference week was the place to do it. But yes, of course, people like to know the backstory of politicians.
Just a quick answer. Do you think it was interesting? She kept her surname.
Yeah. I think it was, it was Gordon Brown, and one of them anyway. No, it was Ed Miliband, who we saw in the kitchen of his house. It turned out it was only one of them. So that backfired a bit. He has two kitchens. Well, not many people have two.
Thank you, Christine. We'll be back, as I understand it, at 11 o'clock with the news.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Today is going to be one of contrast across the UK. High pressure is in charge across the south, bringing in heat from parts of North Africa. Continental Europe really will be quite warm for the time of year, but this frontal system has stalled across Scotland and it will continue to bring problems throughout the rest of the day, and an amber rain warning is in force with a month's worth of rain falling in some locations throughout the day. There is the potential for some disruption to transport, so do take care. Elsewhere for Northern Ireland, Wales and England, some hazy sunshine at times, but staying relatively dry, and temperatures climbing towards 24 degrees Celsius, where we should be around 16 degrees Celsius at this time of the year. Much cooler underneath the cloud and rain across Scotland, with northerly winds coming down across the Northern Isles as well. The rain will continue throughout Saturday evening and overnight. Again, could be some heavy pulses at times, but much of the rest of the UK will stay dry once again. Some cloud pushing into eastern coastal areas, so will turn quite murky here overnight, and a few fog patches developing across southern areas of England and Wales, but a mild night for most of us, around 12-14 degrees Celsius. The rain across Scotland will gradually travel its way northwards throughout Sunday, pushing across the Highlands, Aberdeenshire and then into the Northern Isles later on. Will turn drier then for central southern areas of Scotland, and again for Northern Ireland, Wales and England. A largely dry day with the cloud in the east stubbornly clearing, with some brighter spells developing later on in the morning. Temperatures again climbing up to 24 degrees Celsius, but a bit milder now for Scotland as well. Bye-bye.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom. GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
The Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello and welcome to Saturday Morning Live with me, Esther, and this fella to my right, my husband, Phil. Now, you will have seen in the news that terrible attack by Hamas on Israel. Tamsin will be bringing you the very latest on that this morning.
And if you looked outside or been outside, you might have noticed it's unseasonably warm. And it's going to be for a few days to come too. So what's causing it? How warm is it going to be? We're going to be speaking to meteorologist Jim Dale, who'll give us his expert opinion about what's actually happening.
And then in that new Beckham Netflix, they talk about the unhappiest time in their life. And this was about the alleged affair. Beckham wanted to make sure Victoria was happy, Victoria was unhappy. But we're going to be talking to a psychologist, Dr. Pam Spare, about who is to blame in that situation. It always seems the mistress is looked upon and vilified and the husband gets away scot-free. Why is that?
Of course, they deny that an affair ever took place.
I know, but I'm generally speaking, just so that you know, should it be you, you wouldn't be getting away scot-free, just so you know. Just so you know.
Don't worry, I already know that. And of course, it's Saturday, so of course it's about sport and showbiz. I'm afraid Aidan McGee's not here today, but we've got a sub off the bench in Chris Scudder, who's going to be joining Hayley Palmer with all the latest details on sports and showbiz. And of course, as always, we want to hear what you think about all of the stories that are going on, so please email us gbviews@gbnews.com. But before we get stuck into everything that's going on in the next hour, here's the latest headlines with Tamsin.
Thanks very much, Phil. Good morning from the GB newsroom. It's 1 minute past 11. Thousands of rockets have been fired into Israel from the Gaza Strip in a surprise attack by the Hamas militant group. Large plumes of black smoke could be seen rising from a number of Israeli towns. Israel's defence minister has said that Hamas has launched a war and its troops were fighting against the enemy at every location. Well, local news has reported Israeli civilians barricading in their homes in border towns near Gaza, pleading for help. In a televised message, the police chief told residents to stay put and that we will get to you all. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has issued a defiant message saying, "We are at war and we will win." The Foreign Secretary here condemning the attacks, James Cleverly, wrote on social media, the UK unequivocally condemns the horrific attacks by Hamas on Israeli civilians. The UK will always support Israel's right to defend itself. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has also said this morning there's no justification for this act of terror, which is being perpetrated by those who seek to undermine any chance for future peace in the region. He adding there that Israel has a right to defend herself. Well, to tell us more on this developing story in Israel, I'm joined now by Con Coughlin, who's a defence and Foreign Affairs editor at the Daily Telegraph. Con, thanks very much for joining us this morning. Condemnation this morning from the British government, also on the EU, on these attacks by Hamas on Israel. How likely, pretty unlikely, we would say, of any kind of de-escalation here, given Benjamin Netanyahu's comments this morning?
Well, good morning. I mean, this is a very serious incursion by Hamas militants. You have to go back decades before you've seen this kind of scale of activity from Hamas. And it is a very big security challenge for Israel. And the fact that the Palestinian militants seem to have taken some Israelis hostage, the Israeli media is reporting that 35 Israelis have been taken hostage. I mean, this is an enormous security failure by the Israeli Defense Forces. And I think Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu will be determined to respond very strongly against this. And I think you can expect to see a lot of Israeli military activity targeting Hamas strongholds in the Gaza Strip.
And why now, do you think, Con? I mean, the timing of this, is there any coincidence that it coincides with a Jewish holiday?
Well, it seems that the Hamas militants have caught the Israelis off their guard with this attack because, as you say, the Israeli people have been celebrating the week-long festival of Sukkot. So the suggestion is the Israeli Defense Forces were caught off their guard. Having said that, tensions have been building for some time between Israel and the Palestinians. The whole peace process seems to be frozen. We've had a lot of Israeli military activity raging Palestinian towns over the last month or so, targeting Palestinian militants. And I think Hamas, which is backed by Iran and others, has been waiting for an opportunity to try and put a marker down that the Palestinian cause still remains a live issue.
Con, we'll have to leave it there. Thanks so much for your thoughts this morning. Really interesting. Thank you very much. Con Coughlin, who is the defence editor at the Daily Telegraph there. Thanks for joining us. And we'll, of course, keep you up to date with this story throughout the day. On to other news now. And the Labour Party has unveiled new plans to clamp down on sexual harassment in the workplace. Deputy Leader Angela Rayner opened the Labour Party Women's Conference 2023 in Liverpool, saying the Labour Party is the party of equality. It comes as new figures show almost 5 million women experience such behaviour at work each year. Angela Rayner unveiled plans to break the glass ceiling.
Next Labour government will amend the Equalities Act to introduce a legal duty for employers to take all reasonable steps to stop sexual harassment before it starts. But that's not all. We will make misogyny a hate crime.
SNP leader Humza Yousaf is being urged to rethink plans for independence after Labour's victory in the Rutherglen by-election. Labour's Michael Shanks defeated the Scottish National Party by winning 58% of the vote. It's prompted calls for Yousaf to rethink his proposal that winning the majority of seats at the next general election will be a mandate for negotiations on Scottish independence. Meanwhile, Labour has vowed to work constructively with the Scottish Government if it gets into office. Widespread flooding is expected in parts of Scotland as the country faces a period of relentless rain during the weekend. The Met Office has issued an amber weather warning for a large part of central Scotland, while a yellow weather warning covers most of the country. Travel disruption is also expected, with ScotRail cancelling trains on a number of lines. In contrast, southern areas will have dry weather, with temperatures reaching as high as 25 degrees Celsius. One of Pablo Picasso's masterpieces is going on sale next month and is expected to fetch almost £100 million. The Spanish artist's 1932 work, Femme à la Montre, depicts his golden muse, Marie Therese Walter. She had an affair with the painter and was the subject of many Picasso portraits. The painting is being exhibited at Sotheby's in London from today until Wednesday. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying, play GB News. Now it's back to Esther and Phil.
Thanks, Tamsin. Now it's going to be a balmy few days as parts of Britain see temperatures of up to 26 degrees. Hooray, as far as I can say.
Yeah, but not for Scotland. Unfortunately for them, there's an amber weather warning north of the border.
So what exactly is going on with our October weather?
Well, meteorologist Jim Dale hopefully has all the answers for us. So, Jim, why is it so hot in the south of the country? Why is it all got this torrential rain in Scotland? What's going on?
Weird, I think.
Is it everyone always says it's climate change? Is that?
Well, yeah, we'll come to that. Scotland's getting a little bit of their independence, maybe, with what they're getting compared to the rest of the country, but that's the way it goes. Look, there's a big split. The weather that we've seen, that we're now seeing and will see for the next few days, England, Wales, Northern Ireland for the most part, eventually Scotland, but it's going to take its time. That's come out of France and Spain, where it's been baking, and I'm talking 10 degrees more than the seasonal average. So you mentioned the word climate change, the two words. Yes, there's an element of that. There's got to be. Yeah, we get southerly winds from occasions in October that bring an Indian summer, because we haven't mentioned that word yet.
I will intervene here, because my mum's birthday's October and my birthday's October, so I take a huge sort of interest in the weather in October, and I'm frequently in a T-shirt on October the 12th.
It does happen.
Frequently, because I know. And then on the 24th, and then the end of the month, it goes cold. So all of this, it's climate change. I have to say, I don't believe you, Jim.
So let's put it into perspective, because we need to. You shouldn't ever take a single event, not even Derna in Libya, and not even New York with their floods, and say that's climate change per se, OK? There'll always be added value to what climate change does. It adds a little bit to what's going on. But what you've got to do, Esther, is you've got to join the dots. And
well, I was. Most years, I'm in a T-shirt on the 12th of October.
Join the dots. Join the dots, not just in the UK, but join the dots around the globe. See what's going on around the globe. And if you do that, and I've been in this job for 40 years, Royal Navy first, and then within British Weather Services, and I've never known a busier time and a more dramatic time as far as the weather's concerned. When I say join the dots, in the end, when you join all of these dots of the events that are going on, you end up with a picture.
The thing is, the thing that strikes me about all the climate change thing, Jim, is that, it's like climate change always wins, because if it's hot, it's climate change. If it's really cold, it's climate change. If there's lots of rain, it's climate change. If it's really
the climate in the UK.
If there's lots of snow, it's climate change. If there's no snow, it's climate change. It seems that whatever the weather is, it's down to climate change.
OK, so I don't want to look upon climate change necessarily as a overt negative. There will be massive negatives within that, but we have to grasp the positives as well. And that is the direction of travel. The argument, I realise what you're saying, you're in the minority, but you're welcome to your minority, that's absolutely fine. But look, the positives that need to be grasped in terms of the direction of travel, where we're going, what we've got to do, to lead this nation towards...
Jim, we only want to know what the weather was this weekend.
I know.
I didn't want a big psychological, in-depth talk about where you thought weather was going and join up the dots. But we do appreciate your time, Jim.
That's OK.
Thank you very much indeed. But it is warmer, but it's the rain I don't like.
People should read your book.
Yeah, this is a present to you guys.
Whether or not, we're going to be reading that.
More then, maybe.
We're going to be reading that.
Thank you very much.
I was just interested in the rain, because it's not good on the old herd. You see what I mean? This is not the best weather.
Don't go to Scotland.
But anyway, we're back now with Kevin Woodford and Simon Danchuk. Kevin, what have you got on your stories that's caught your eye today?
OK. I love the weather. I just adore the weather, Jim. It's fantastic. Top Gear, one of the most fabulous programmes that the BBC have ever produced. Started in, 1977. Presented originally by that lovely dancing woman, Angela Rippon, believe it or not. She presented.
And GBNews presenter.
GBNews presenter. She presented Top Gear in 1977. It went through all sorts of sort of changes. 2002. The man Clarkson got hold of it and said, this is too boring, let's make it exciting. And he made it in this fabulous magazine show, which it has been. But then we started to get a bit silly. 2006, Richard Hammond, at 288 miles an hour in this jet-propelled rocket machine, has this horrendous accident where he ends up with a brain injury. Now, and then the show still went through this metamorphosis of such huge success. It brought in huge Hollywood stars to appear in the show, in you star in a car. Tom Cruise, Cameron Diaz. It was phenomenal. And then they make the stupid mistake, in my opinion, right, of not following health and safety, which, normally I'd say, come on, give it a rest. But in this particular case, health and safety should have been followed, where Freddie Flintoff is doing 130 miles an hour in an open-top, three-wheel vehicle without any face protection whatsoever. So what's going to happen now is one of the biggest brands that the BBC have ever had, huge money-making machine, great entertainment, will be scrapped.
Right decision, or should they just have toned it down a bit?
No, because once they get to that stage, Phil, the show is the show. The nature of the show is the show. It's like, say, in the jungle, when you start putting rats on people's faces, that, you know, and having them climb up stupid cliffs and jump off and all the rest of it. The nature of the show, that's the exciting part of the show. You take that away and you haven't got Top Gear. But what they should have done is followed health and safety. Flint's shots should have been protected, as simple as that.
And it was a good earner for the BBC.
It was a great earner.
Simon, what's your story?
Oh, my story is I've just stopped funding, and it's all about Dale Vince. It's in the Daily Mail. Dale Vince, you'll recall, is a big sponsor of the Labour Party, but also Just Stop Oil.
And owner of Forest Green Rovers Football Club.
Oh, yes, that's right. Yeah, I forgot about that. And he's made a lot of money through energy. His energy company. He's been putting that into Just Stop Oil, but he's now saying he's stopping funding Just Stop Oil, and he's going to put the money into Just Vote. So he's setting up a new campaign to get young people to vote, and he's going to put more money into the Labour Party to try and help them win the next general election.
Is that? I mean, obviously, I'm sure the Labour Party will welcome the extra funding, so in that sense, it's a boost. But is it a boost for floating voters thinking, do I really want somebody who funds Just Stop Oil involved in the Labour? Is there a negative in there as well as a positive?
There certainly is a negative in there. I think he's given about £1.5 million over the last few years to the Labour Party, and the argument is that he's dictating policy. So we know that Labour now have come out and said no more oil, gas licences in the North Sea. That's clearly a policy that Dale Vince supports. I think they're sticking with the 2030 climate change targets that the Prime Minister has said he wants to move to 2035. And interestingly, Labour have been saying votes for 16-year-olds, which seems to tie in with what Dale Vince is saying about getting young people to vote.
So he's getting a lot of bang for his buck, isn't he? And he obviously doesn't want the disruption anymore. He's just going to change policy. He now sees it's the right time, and he's only got, you know, however long it is before the general election.
Yeah. Now, I've been warned off my saucy story for today, Kevin.
I can't believe that.
Yeah,
I did.
It was. Did.
Well, I kind of.
I've been warned off it. We'll just leave it.
Should we take a poll? Should we take a poll? Yeah. Do we want? Because I don't want me to, you know, have a big say over what Philip wants to do for a story. So hands up. Do we want to hear Philip's saucy story this week?
Please.
2. There you go. 3.
Well,
you've won. Just give us your saucy story.
I'll just mention it briefly. It's page 33 of The Sun. It says, Zap and tickle is better than Viagra, and apparently men can get a better reception in bed by zapping their doodahs with radio waves. Have you?
I didn't even know. He came to me with this story,
Scientists
and I said, "Where's it going?"
Wand emitting 1 megahertz of waves combats erectile dysfunction without the need for drugs such as Viagra. Did you know that, Kevin?
Well, surprisingly, no.
OK.
Are you giving it a try, Simon?
I'm not aware of the equipment that you can buy to do that, and as a good Yorkshireman as you are, I think you should DIY one. Perhaps take the old element of an hairdryer out, try and work
I'm going to ask another question. Now you heard the story. Was I right to boycott that story?
Yes,
hands up.
Anyway,
both hands up. Oh, right, I was right.
Very quick, I want to get your view on this, and I'm going to go for a controversial one. I'm probably leading with my chin, but I'm going to go with it anyway. Page 18 of the Daily Mirror. Fiona Bruce says sorry after Question Time TV backlash. She was trying to identify somebody in the audience to ask a question, and she said the black guy in the middle. And apparently that was completely outrageous to say the black guy in the middle. She should apparently have referred to the clothing he was wearing. But if there's a lot of white people in an audience and not many black people, surely if you want to identify somebody, what's wrong with saying that you're not saying, you know, an ugly person or a...
No.
You know, why can you not say that?
Take the opposite view of that. If the audience was predominantly black and I was the white person in the audience and Fiona Bruce pointed to me as the white person in the audience, I wouldn't take offence to that at all. No,
am I missing something here, Simon? Because I just don't. I don't understand it. I mean, I'm obviously in the wrong, I presume, but I've no idea why that was offensive.
No, I just think it doesn't deserve all the attention. The BBC have edited it out of the programme.
Well, that's the bit I was strange. They edited the 2 words out that they didn't want in. All of a sudden, that makes it a story, whereas most people would never have known that
Sure.
There was an offence there at all.
Exactly. I think the preference
BBC's lost the way.
Well, exactly. But I think the preference is that she refers to colours of clothes rather than people. But nevertheless, the reaction is overreaction.
But so you can refer to a colour of a jumper, but you can't refer to the colour of a skin.
But if I remember correctly from reading the article as well, her comment is that she couldn't see the clothing of the particular guy that she was referring to. So it was simply a very clean way of getting a camera to that particular
Well,
guy.
I want to know what our viewers think, because I think this has got us talking. We couldn't understand how she defended anybody there. So let us have your views. Kevin, thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure.
Simon, thank you very much indeed. We'll see you again very soon on the show. But coming up, as Victoria Beckham reminisces on what she called the hardest time in her marriage, we want to know who is to blame in any alleged affair, the husband or the mistress. Phil, you know who I'd be blaming straight away. We'll be speaking to psychologist Dr. Pam Spur. But first, your latest news with Tamsin Roberts.
Thanks, Esther. Let's just bring you up to date with the developing situation in Israel now. We've heard from the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, this morning, who said he's shocked by this morning's attacks, but that Israel has an absolute right to defend itself. Now, thousands of rockets were fired from the Gaza Strip in a surprise attack by the Hamas militant group. Large plumes of black smoke could be seen rising from a number of Israeli towns. Israel's defence minister said Hamas has launched a war and its troops were fighting against the enemy at every location. At least 22 Israelis have been killed in the attack so far. That's according to local news in Israel. And there have been reports of explosions near Tel Aviv and areas surrounding Gaza. Israel's military says it's striking targets in the Gaza Strip amid what it calls a situational assessment. Well, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has issued a defiant message this morning saying we are at war and we will win. Foreign Secretary James Cleverly here has said the UK unequivocally condemns the horrific attacks by Hamas on Israeli civilians, and Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer also speaking this morning on this situation, saying there is no justification for this act of terror, adding that Israel has a right to defend herself. Of course, we'll keep you up to date with this story throughout the morning. And if you want to get an update on any other of the news we're bringing you this morning, just visit our website, gbnews.com.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel. News.
Welcome back to Saturday Morning Live with Esther and Phil. It is 11:25. Lots of views coming in about all sorts of different things, particularly about housing. We were discussing earlier what was the reason why rents were at a record high. Darren says, why doesn't anyone come out and say that the reason for 90% of this country's problems are down to the out-of-control population figures? As soon as someone comes out and says we need to stop this population growth, then they will get most people's support. You did a poll about this, didn't you?
Yeah,
asking people.
Oh, we did ask that question.
We did ask.
We
did ask at the, before the show started. Actually, we put a poll out to ask who do people blame mainly for the high rents, and actually the figures came out. 59% said immigration, 22% said lack of house building, and 18% said profiteering landlords. So, Darren, it seems that you're with the majority opinion from our poll that immigration is the biggest cause of the high rents in the country.
Now, Victoria Beckham has spoken in a new Netflix documentary about her husband David's alleged affair with his former personal assistant, Rebecca Luce.
Of course, they deny the affair, that there was an affair, but she described the aftermath of the claims as the hardest period of her marriage to the football star.
But in any affair, who is really to blame? The spouse who cheats? I think so. Or the person they cheated with?
Well, joining us now to discuss this is psychologist Dr. Pam Spur. Pam, thanks for joining us. So, come on, Esther's posed the question, who's to blame in these situations? Who's most to blame, I suppose, you know, who's most to blame? Is it the spouse? Is it the mistress? Or is it the nagging wife who made the spouse go off in the first place?
Oh, that was a bit contentious there. See what I mean? Absolving all of the blame straight away. Oh, it wasn't me, Gov. It was what everybody else did that made me do something.
Just giving an option.
Pam, we're having our own little, whatever tiff here. Go on.
Well, good morning. I've got to say, I think both people are to blame. But let's look at the powerful societal expectations we have for male and female behavior. And we kind of say men will be men and women will be good and kind and nurturing and not homewreckers. So when an affair is discovered, we tend to come down with a double whammy with vilifying the woman involved. And in fact, a major social attitudes survey found that 2/3 of people will blame the woman, which I think is quite outrageous that nowadays people still blame the woman.
Can I ask, Pam, because I was trying to work this through and see if there was a logical reason rather than just an emotional reason to blame the woman. Do you think that would allow you to save your marriage in a way? If you can put the blame on the external person, does that allow you to save your marriage with the person who went off?
Well, that's a good point, Esther, because obviously when someone gets caught cheating, they often look for any exit, any excuse. So to blame the other person, saying the other person made it impossible for them to say no, and that sort of thing is often used. But of course, that's absolute rubbish. If you're an adult, you know how to say no, and you know how to recognize when you're on a slippery slope. You're flirting a bit at work with someone, and you know there's that slippery slope, and you can stop yourself from going down it if you're kind of an emotionally mature adult. What's really interesting, though, is after an affair is discovered, a major piece of relationship research showed that 60% of people will stay with their partner. So the majority of people choose to stay and try and work it out. And of course, in my work, I say, how happily do they do so? Because some couples will go on to keep throwing it in the partner's face, so they never actually resolve the issues underlying it. But it's an easy thing to do, to kind of just keep throwing it into their face and say, whenever you round about the children or finances, it's fair. Well, that's not proper healing. So if you're going to stay together, you do need to actually try and sort out the root of the problem.
So, Pam, how do people resolve these things then? Well, how do you get... I mean, Victoria Beckham said it was the toughest time of her life. David Beckham said he didn't know how they got through it. So how do couples get through it?
And in public life, and if you're famous.
Exactly, particularly if you're in the public eye and everybody's following every last comma and dot of the story.
Which is an enormous pressure. And I've got to say, male celebrities often are excused for this kind of behavior, whereas a female celebrity wouldn't be, going back to those expectations we have that women do not do these things. But of course, some women do. First, you have to look at what type of cheating. There's 4 main types of cheaters. There's the opportunist who went to a conference and actually got too drunk and actually didn't say no when someone came on to them. There is also the repeat offender, someone who actually is a risk taker. And that's a very difficult situation to handle because this person thrives on the risk of an illicit affair. Next, you have the revenge affair, where someone finds out their partner's cheating, they go cheat. So that throws fire onto the heat. Finally, you have the midlife affair, where someone decides, I've been married for 20 years, 25 years, I want to see if the grass is greener. So that's also quite a dangerous situation to be handling, because if they are feeling bad about their midlife crisis and they've chosen to have an affair, it's very hard to solve those things. The easiest thing, once you've looked at the reason why they've cheated, is to then not take a rash decision, especially if there are children. You don't want to throw the person out when you've got little children, let's say, only to have them back a week later because you've decided you can solve it. So do not make rash decisions.
Dr. Pam Spare, thank you very much indeed for joining us today.
The thing I'm worried about is Esther was writing furiously.
I totally was.
Taking notes.
I
I'm
was.
not entirely sure what you were writing. I tell you,
because
why you were writing.
Because I did think those 4 different affairs were very different. The opportunist, I thought, was very different to the repeat offender, in the words repeat offender, to the revenge affair. I see that as different to the midlife, whatever that was, crisis-y sort of thing. So, which is the worst? Repeat offenders sounding bad to me. Repeat offender, just say. So that's why I put them.
Anyway, it's all written down now, so there we go. Anyway, coming up, we'll be joined by mother and daughter Lynn and Samantha Crilly, who'll be telling us about the launch of their Trouble Muncher toy, an app ahead of Mental Health Awareness Week. But first, here's the news with Tamsin.
Phil, thanks very much. Here are the headlines at 11:32. Rishi Sunak says he's shocked by this morning's attacks in Israel, but that the country has an absolute right to defend itself. Thousands of rockets have been fired from the Gaza Strip in a surprise attack by the Hamas militant group. Large plumes of black smoke could be seen rising from a number of Israeli towns. Israel's defence minister said Hamas has launched a war and its troops were fighting against the enemy at every location. Local news have reported Israeli civilians barricading themselves in their homes in border towns near Gaza, pleading for help. And in a televised message, the police chief told residents to stay put. We will get to you all. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu issued a defiant message saying, "We are at war and we will win." He said that Hamas had launched a murderous surprise attack against the State of Israel and its citizens, but warned the enemy will pay an unprecedented price. Here, the Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, has said the UK unequivocally condemns the horrific attacks by Hamas on Israeli civilians. And Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has also spoken this morning, saying there is no justification for this act of terror, adding Israel has a right to defend herself. Of course, bringing you more on this story throughout the morning as we get it. On to other news now, and the Labour Party has unveiled new plans to clamp down on sexual harassment in the workplace. Deputy leader Angela Rayner opened the Labour Party Women's Conference 2023 in Liverpool, saying the Labour Party is the party of equality. It comes as new figures show almost 5 million women experience such behaviour at work each year. Angela Rayner unveiled plans to break the class ceiling and the glass ceiling.
Next Labour government will amend the Equalities Act to introduce a legal duty for employers to take all reasonable steps to stop sexual harassment before it starts. But that's not all. We will make misogyny a hate crime.
Those are the headlines. Of course, you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com. Now, it's back to Weston.
Thanks there, Tamsin. Now we're joined by Lynn Crilly and her daughter Samantha, who are launching their Trouble Muncher toy ahead of Mental Health Awareness Week.
Samantha has developed a teddy bear and app to support young people going through mental health issues. They're going to be giving away 10 bears to the first 10 children or parents who contact them. And we're delighted to say they're both here with us now. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. So come on, tell us about the Trouble Muncher toy.
So the idea came about a good couple of years ago now, and something I've always struggled with is mental health, like a lot of people. And one thing I always did, and I was very lucky to be able to do, was message mum. They would be long thoughts, but a lot of them were kind of short thoughts. I mean, I look back and I feel a bit sorry for you, but I bombarded you with all these kind
what
of...
a mum's for.
Yeah, I know.
I
look back and I'm like, my God. And they were just short negative thoughts. They were just things that came into my head, and I would just send them to mum, and it felt quite therapeutic. It was sort of a problem halved. A problem shared is a problem halved. And... Yeah.
For you.
For me. Yeah, mum was sort of at home. And I thought, what happens if people don't have... I'm not very close to my mum. What happens if people aren't very close to someone that they love or they trust? And that's where I thought about the app. If you could put your thoughts into an app, and then that would kind of... It's the same kind of toy that's in the app. And... that toy would, that kind of character would munch up your thoughts, and we did kind of loads of captions when it would be eating your thoughts. It's mainly for younger people that have technology.
So it's getting rid of the negativity in your brain.
Yeah.
Just getting it off your chest.
Yes.
So where were your negative thoughts coming from? You talk about your mental health. What was it? In what ways? What avenues were you going down?
I mean, so I suffered from OCD and anorexia, and... Oh, God, there was loads of them. But they would be maybe if I was out or if I was laying in my bed, or they would be just ones where maybe I'd had a thought come into my head, an intrusive thought, and I was struggling with it. I would just say it to you. I'd be like, this has come into my head. And you'd say, maybe you'd reason it with me a little bit, and then you would just say, well, you've said it now and it's gone.
So you had those bad thoughts, and maybe if I've got a bad thought, maybe I'll share them with Phil, maybe it'd be mum or dad or whatever it was. But with you then, there was deeper than that. So it was moving into mental health, and it was then for you triggering not eating then. Is that what it was? What were those thoughts? Were they bad about you? Was it, I'm not good enough? Were they confidence thought, I'm too fat? What were your thoughts?
I mean, many thoughts. Everything, really, weren't they? They were
Mum, do you remember the thoughts?
Oh, they've gone from my head. They're in you now.
I certainly do,
yeah.
No, I think that it was, obviously, Sam's 32 now, and it all started when she was 13, and we're talking sort of nearly 20 years ago. Mental health wasn't talked about as much, and at the beginning, you just never think it's going to be your child. You know, I don't know, it was you, I think you were the only person in the school, though now we know that she wasn't, that had mental ill health, but the thoughts at the beginning were really distorted, and I was thinking, oh my God, you know, where's all this coming from? But then afterwards, I realised that once she was telling me, she actually felt better.
Yeah.
Did you realise that at the time? Did you realise at the time that that was actually helping, or were you feeling quite helpless at the time?
I was feeling, really helpless, and as a family, we felt really helpless, which is sort of what has led us into doing all the stuff within the mental health world that we do now.
And those cuddly toys, as it were, your little munchers.
Yeah.
So God, they're fantastic. Let's say, so what actually would a child do with that? Is it put the words in the rucksack on the back? What is it you do?
They've got a pad in the back that says share your troubles. So it just encourages children to express their feelings and to communicate, because we're in this really technology-driven world where a lot of them now are becoming quite introvert themselves and talking to actual people, they don't find easy.
Yeah, but what they don't kind of know is that they'll put the thought in there, then when they leave for school, the thought will be in there for their parents to come and look at. Obviously, they don't know that their parents will come and pick it out, but their parents can have a look at what they're worrying about, kind of an indirect way, if their kid isn't talking about it. Maybe they can approach it.
There, and I totally agree with you, and I've said this for you, the communication is breaking down. People might be on Twitter and they might do 140 digits, but I say a lot of people's anger and upset and lack of confidence is because they can't actually speak through an issue.
They can't talk through it, and I think these are sort of aimed at
younger,
sort of 3 to 5, 3 upwards. I mean, they are in some schools now.
Was it a big thing for you to ring up your mum and tell her because tell her what your thoughts were and everything? Because I mean, I totally get this, that you want to write it down, because it's not just a question of not having somebody or not being able to express it, but there must be a bit of, you know, sort of maybe embarrassed about wanting to. I'm not sure I'd want to tell my parents.
But would you want them reading a note you'd done?
No, but I can see that in itself, writing it down is actually getting it out of my system. But was it a big thing for you to actually tell your mum as well?
Well, we're quite close, aren't we? We're probably abnormally close. So not really.
You didn't need a muncher. Your mum was doing all of the
It's a little bit weird.
But lots of people aren't that close.
So for me, it wasn't. But
and
when
your twin sister, she does have a twin sister.
Yeah, I have a lovely twin sister.
But you never went to your twin sister?
You did.
I did sometimes, Now the barrier's broken a lot more, and she's amazing. But before it was, bless you, was just you.
In the early days.
Well, what you've brought and what you've produced obviously is fantastic, and that is starting that communication to get rid of those bad thoughts and not go and have mental health or anorexic conditions. I want to thank you both very much indeed. I might have one of these. I might have one. If I fall out with Phil, this could be my way of communicating with him.
That pad will be used up in no time.
Share your trouble. I'll tell you what it is. Need to take me out. After me, take me out for dinner.
Well, thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for what you're doing. It's really fantastic.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having us on.
Thank you.
Anyway, coming up, your favourites Chris Scudder and Hayley Palmer will be joining us to give you all the latest sports and showbiz news.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
And Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Saturday Morning Live with Esther and Phil. It's now 11:45. Got some views there?
Yes, we have. We were just speaking to Lynn and Samantha Crilly about their trouble muncher, and James says, what a lovely idea and a touching story. I'd definitely get my child a trouble muncher. They would really love it. And Lara says, I have severe anxiety. I'm so pleased people are taking it properly rather than taking the mick out of anxiety. What a lovely idea. I should just say that we were talking about David Beckham and Victoria Beckham and who's to blame if there's a affair. Obviously, David Beckham says there wasn't an affair, and we accept his word for that. But Madeline here says, if it is true that he had an affair with Rachel Lewis, I do not blame Rachel. I would have done the same. David Beckham's hot, so she wouldn't blame Rebecca Lewis if that is actually true.
I think there was lots of women thinking that.
Exactly, absolutely.
At the time. Now, look, we're delighted to have sports journalist Chris Scudder and showbiz journalist Hayley Palmer with us in the studio.
And we've also got Simon Danchuk back in here for a last thought about what we should expect from the Labour Party conference coming up. So, Simon, obviously you've been to many a Labour Party conference. There'll be cock-a-hoop, the by-election results. They're miles ahead in the opinion polls. How do they stop sort of complacency setting in this week?
Yeah, I think Keir has to seal the deal with the electorate at this conference. It's probably the last annual conference before a general election. He needs to put some meat on the bones in terms of policy. He needs to convince people that he's got solutions to illegal immigration. He needs to say where he stands in terms of climate change targets. Where is he in terms of defence? It's not that long ago Keir was backing Jeremy Corbyn to be Prime Minister, who was anti-NATO and pro-nuclear disarmament. So he needs to really frame himself, make it clear he's not just sitting on the fence, but he's going for this and where he stands on a variety of policies.
Rishi Sunak in his conference speech said that Keir Starmer and the Labour Party are trying to win the election by believing in nothing nothing and saying nothing and hoping that nobody notices. Is that a fair criticism, do you think? Is that, or do you think people might think that about Keir Starmer?
I think it's a fair criticism, and looking at this by-election in Scotland, it's fair to say that Labour haven't won the by-election. The SNP lost it, and replicating that across the country isn't really enough to be able to gain power at a general election.
And it was interesting, the leader of the Unite Union said, oh, Labour's just managerial. It hasn't got anything, it isn't saying anything, and it's not standing up for what the people want. But you're staying with us here, and as I said, we've got Chris, we've got Hayley in the studio giving us the latest showbiz. You know who I'm interested in? I've always been a huge fan, and that is of Cher.
Yeah.
And she's doing her first ever, Christmas album or something?
She's got a Christmas album and a Christmas song, and I'm going to predict now that it's going to be Christmas #1. I have heard the song, and it is an absolute tune. Even you'd like it, Phil.
I'm a massive fan of Cher. I think she's brilliant.
Does it have a vocoder? She always has those vocoder things, doesn't she, where she just the auto-tune thing?
Yeah, but that's Cher, isn't it? We love that sound. It's called DJ Play a Christmas Song. She's also got an album coming out as well, which features Stevie Wonder, Michael Bublé and Cyndi Lauper, which is out on the 20th of October. So go on, Cher.
I remember reading Cher's biography, or I'm not sure if it was autobiography or biography, and you talk about her voice, how unique it is. When she was called in as a backing singer, they were like, we can't have you, you know, your voice is too unusual, and that's how she became the solo artist.
It's brilliant, because usually, you know, people don't do Christmas. It's a bit gimmicky, isn't it? But this is the one.
Cliff Richard used to do the Christmas #1 every year. Are you going to buy Cher's song?
I could well do, actually.
There we go.
But you know...
You forget how long ago it was. Sonny and Cher, I got you, babe. Great song. Great song. Oh, he died, didn't he, Sonny Bono?
Yeah, very
skiing accident?
Yes. Yeah, it was, yeah.
Some years ago.
So lots going on in sport, Chris.
Before I say this, you know, we've all been talking about the Beckham Netflix.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Chris is in it.
A little cameo from me.
He's in it.
Yeah. Somebody's texted. I haven't seen it yet, but somebody texted me yesterday.
For the wrong reasons.
Any reason. It was a good one to be in, Chris. You can tell us.
What are you doing in it?
Well with Bex. I mean, he was going. Of all the England players I used to interview, he was the one player you used to think really bust a gut, and it really mattered to him. I loved him for that, you know. I remember when the day he finished the captaincy after the 2006 World Cup, he cried, you know, in the media conference, and he got up out of his chair, and I started clapping. You know, this is Beckham exiting the stage, you know, and he just. He went.
And he didn't half.
That's not what impartial journalists normally do, is it?
Well, I just thought it was appropriate.
But he did practice. I know his dad. And he practiced to get those goals.
Yeah, the free kicks.
Yeah, he was, you know.
So what's going on in the sport now? We got the Rugby World Cup, Cricket World Cup.
Just on Beck's old club, I mean, Man United, worst start for 37 years, I think. If they lose at home to Brentford today, it's 3 home defeats in a row. Not happened since 1962, I don't think. You know, there's the whole narrative of who's going to buy the club. It's dragged on and on and on. Interesting that the women's team played last night and there's a massive Glazers out sign. You know, they want the Americans out, that club, you know, women's team, the men's team. It will happen eventually, but, you know, they're not popular. And the United are struggling because of it. They're playing Brentford today, 10th in the league, miles behind the top few clubs.
And the big controversy was Kevin Keegan's comments this week about we shouldn't have, you know, women pundits talking on the men's game. I think lots of people might secretly agree with him. I mean, I couldn't care whether they're men or women as long as they're good, but...
You can't really say that, but...
People, I just have to know.
Yeah, they have, but you know, what I'm saying is... I mean, to give it some context...
Too late, you should have told me earlier.
Kevin said he likes female presenters. There's some great female presenters around at the moment. There really are. What he doesn't like so much is the context of having a pundit, so talking about the men's game... what he wants is players who have been there and done it, like he did, you know.
So what he's saying is they don't really know because they weren't there and they have... Hayley, would you have an issue whether it's male, female?
No, because I'm just showbiz. I'm just jazz hands, so...
Yeah. Do you not think it matters whether it's a man, or do you not think...
No comment, no. Not
There are some good pundits, but, you know, I can understand the context.
There are some really good female... I mean, Kelly Cates is a really good football presenter, I always think, on Sky Sports.
I also think it's what you're used to, what you're not used to. I remember years and years ago when most singers were men rather than women. You were used to the vocal cords of men, and then you got used to women, and now they're the highest paid. You see what I mean? It's what you get used to, so women are coming forward.
Simon, what do you... Women in football said Kevin Keegan should keep his opinion opinions to himself. What?
Well, I'm not really into football, but I think Kevin does sound like he's a bit of a bygone age in terms of what he's saying here. I think he's missing the mark. He's behind the.
Yeah, you can see the narrative.
He's behind the curve on that one.
I think so.
But listen, there are some very good female pundits, but you know, some guys don't.
Moving on, more importantly, Elton John doing a makeup range.
See, this is more my thing because he is going to be the face of Charlotte Tilbury, which they always have a big Christmas campaign, and I actually use Charlotte Tilbury on my skin.
And would Elton John modelling it be an incentive for you to go and buy it, Hayley? It seems a strange...
It's a bit of a weird choice, I must admit, because usually it is Kate Moss, and I think Kate Moss is doing it as well, and Jordan Dunn, but Elton John is being picked, and I was like, oh, OK, that's an interesting decision.
See,
but I think...
men wearing makeup. Phil, you've got some on right now.
I have. I've noticed anybody coming and asking me to do their Christmas promotion.
I was going to say, what face cream do you use?
No, it's just makeup for the TV. It's just makeup for the TV.
I'm to make up what you are to sport.
There we go. All right, then.
But the rugby's going to be good.
Yeah, go on. Tell us about the Rugby World Cup.
We're getting to the business end of the tournament now. So, quarterfinals next week. Wales are going to be there. England are going to be there. They might even play each other, possibly. We'll know more this weekend. Big game today, though. Scotland against Ireland. Scotland got to beat Ireland today, or else they're going home.
That's a tough
They've
ask.
got a horrible group, because they were in with South Africa as well. Weren't expected to go through. But it's a knockout game, effectively. Ireland can still... If Ireland were to lose, but you get these things called losing bonus points. So if you don't lose by more than 7 points, then you get a point.
It's nearly as complicated as the actual rules of rugby union, to be honest. Are you a rugby union
Chris
fan?
Good?
Yeah. Would you like any sport?
No, I don't do sport.
You're more Showbiz, aren't you?
He does politics.
Yeah.
It's the Simon and Hayley show, the non-sport.
We got our own show together.
Simon, thank you very much. Hayley, thank you very much. Chris, thank you very much. We've had a cracking show today, haven't we, with everything that's been going on. But look, that's it from us. We will be back tomorrow at next week, next Saturday at exactly the same time, 10 a.m. Until then, enjoy the rest of the programme.
Stay for Emily Carver. Stay for Emily Carver.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Today is going to be one of contrast across the UK. High pressure is in charge across the south, bringing in heat from parts of North Africa. Continental Europe really will be quite warm for the time of year. But this frontal system has stalled across Scotland, and it will continue to bring problems throughout the rest of the day. And an amber rain warning is in force, with a month's worth of rain falling in some locations throughout the day. There is the potential for some disruption